Ever looked at the final price of something, maybe online, and thought, whoa, where did those extra fees come from? Well, something kind of similar can happen with imported goods. It's called tariff stacking.
Right, like those unexpected fees, but on a much bigger scale sometimes for businesses bringing things into the country.
Exactly. And there's been a recent government move trying to, well, sort that out. And that's what we're digging into today.
Yeah, this isn't just some dry policy document that you can ignore, this stacking thing. It can eventually hit the price of stuff you actually buy. Think cars, maybe building materials, even electronics components.
So we're going to unpack a recent presidential order. It's, a government document, so it's got some formal language.
Definitely.
But the goal behind it seems pretty practical, pretty relevant to, well, how things move around the economy.
That's the idea.
Okay, so this deep dive, we've got the text of this executive order right here. Our mission basically is to figure out why now? Which specific tariffs are we talking about? And how does this order actually stop the stacking?
We're aiming for clarity, yeah. Trying to make sense of something that could seem complicated but might actually matter to your business or just, help you understand the economic currents a bit better.
Right. Let's get into it then. This tariff stacking.
Yeah.
What exactly is it that caught the president's eye?
Okay, so put simply, tariff stacking is just when you've got more than one tariff applied to the very same imported product.
Like layered on top of each other?
Exactly. Think about importing some specific type of metal part, right? There might be the regular import duty, but then maybe because of where it came from or what it's made of, there's another special tariff. And maybe even a third one related to something else entirely.
Wow. Okay.
And these just add up. They stack. So the final duty cost could be way higher than maybe either tariff was intended to be on its own.
And the president's order actually says that, right? That it can be too much.
It does. It notes that this cumulative effect, the stacking, can push the total duty rates beyond what is necessary to achieve the intended policy goals of those individual tariffs.
Interesting. So it's not that the individual tariffs are wrong, necessarily?
Not always.
But putting them all together on one item can be overkill.
That's the argument here, yes. Each tariff probably has its own reason, maybe protecting U.S. jobs, a national security thing, responding to trade practices elsewhere.
Sure.
But when all those different reasons pile on to the same imported widget, you get this inflated cost. And that can mess with supply chains for businesses and, yeah, potentially mean higher prices for you down the road.
Okay, so that's the problem they're trying to fix. What about the solution, this presidential order? How does it work? It meant some legal stuff at the start.
Yeah, it cites legal authorities. You'll see references to things like the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the Trade Act of 1974. The main point isn't really the specific laws themselves for our chat, but that the president is acting based on powers granted by Congress for trade, national security, that kind of thing.
Right, so there's a legal justification they're pointing to. But in simple terms, what's the order trying to do?
It says its purpose very clearly, to avoid the cumulative effect of overlapping tariffs on certain articles. Straightforward, really.
Just stop the stacking for specific things.
Exactly. For a defined list of tariffs, it sets up rules so you know which tariff applies if an item gets caught by more than one of them.
Okay, which tariffs then? Because you said it's specific. It's not like every single import duty is affected.
Oh, definitely not. It's very targeted. Section 2 of the order lists them out quite precisely.
Let's hear them.
Okay, first up is Proclamation 1908. That one's recent, March 26, 2025, and it deals with tariffs on automobiles and auto parts.
Okay, cars and parts, big one.
Yeah. Then you have tariffs linked to stopping illicit drug flows across the northern border. That started with Executive Order 14193 back in February 2025, and it's been amended a few times since.
Northern border. So goods potentially coming in from Canada could be involved there?
Could be, yeah, depending on the specifics. And then similarly, there are tariffs related to the situation at the southern border. That was Executive Order 14194, also from February 1st, 2025, and also amended.
Got it. Border-related tariffs, north and south. What else?
And then we get to the ones that have been around a bit longer but are included here. The Section 232 tariffs on aluminum and steel.
Ah, the steel and aluminum tariffs. I remember those making news.
Right. Originally from Proclamations 9704 and 9705 back in March 2018. And they've been tweaked since then, too, with other proclamations mentioned in the order.
Okay, so that's the list. Autos, northern border, southern border, aluminum, and steel tariffs. Pretty clear.
That's the specific group this order applies to.
So, if let's say a metal bracket for a car was potentially subject to both the auto tariff and the steel tariff, this order steps in.
Precisely. And that brings us right to Section 3, which lays out the actual non-stacking rules. It's basically a priority list.
A tariff hierarchy. Okay, how does that work? Sounds complicated.
It's actually fairly logical once you see the order. Rule 1.
Yeah.
If something gets hit by those auto tariffs we mentioned first.
Section 2A, the car parts 1.
Right. Then it won't also get hit by any of the others on that list. Not the border ones, not steel, not aluminum. The auto tariff wins, essentially. It takes top priority in this specific group.
Okay, so if it's an auto part subject to that tariff, it's shielded from the others on this list. What's next down the ladder?
Next priority goes to the border-related tariffs, the northern or southern border ones. That's sections 2B and 2C. If a product falls under either of those, it won't also get hit by the steel or aluminum tariffs further down the list.
So border security tariffs trump the steel and aluminum ones if there's an overlap.
Okay. What about steel and aluminum themselves? Can they still stack on top of each other?
Now that's the interesting exception.
Yep.
The order makes a specific point about this. It says, yes, the steel tariffs, Section 2D, and the aluminum tariffs, Section 2E, can still be applied cumulatively.
Oh.
Yeah, if the imported item meets the criteria for both. So you could have a situation where some kind of maybe specialized alloy product gets hit with both. That's allowed under this order.
Huh. Okay, that's a really key detail. So the general rule is no stacking within this group except steel and aluminum can stack with each other.
You got it.
And just to be super clear, this order isn't getting rid of any of these underlying tariffs, right? The auto tariff still exists. The steel tariff still exists.
Absolutely. That's crucial. The order emphasizes that these individual tariff actions, the proclamations and executive orders listed, they all remain valid. They're still enforceable on their own.
Right. What changes is just how they interact when they overlap on the same product. The duty rates won't pile up according to that priority system, but the tariffs themselves are still active policies.
Makes sense. It's managing the combo effect, not wiping the slate clean. Okay, but what about other tariffs? There are tons of duties out there, right?
Yes, loads. And that's a really important point of clarification. Section 4 of the order tackles this head on. It states very clearly this non-stacking rule does not apply to any other duties, taxes, fees, anything outside that specific list in Section 2.
Can you give some examples of what's definitely not covered by this anti-stacking rule?
Sure. The order specifically calls out a few. First, the regular duties you find in the Harmonized Tariff Schedule of the United States, the HTSUS. That's like the baseline tariff system.
Okay, standard duties are separate.
Right. Also, explicitly not included are the Section 301 tariffs. Those have been a big deal, especially regarding imports from China. They are not part of this non-stacking arrangement.
Good to know. Anything else?
Yes. It also mentions Executive Order 14195, which deals with the synthetic opioid supply chain from China. Those related duties are separate. And finally, it mentions anti-dumping and countervailing duties, AD/CVD cases. Those are totally different processes aimed at unfair pricing or subsidies, and they are not affected by this order either.
Okay, so this is really a surgical adjustment, isn't it? Focused only on that specific list. Auto, border, steel, aluminum.
Precisely. It's addressing a potential interaction issue just within that group, not a wholesale change to U.S. trade remedy law or general tariffs.
Gotcha. So we understand the what and the why. How does this actually happen? Like, who makes sure that customs officials are applying the right tariff based on this priority list?
Right, the implementation. Section 5 covers that. The main responsibility falls on the Secretary of Homeland Security.
Okay.
They act through Customs and Border Protection, CBP, the people at the ports. They need to implement this, and they'll do it in consultation with the Secretary of the Treasury.
So CBP needs to update its systems, its guidelines.
Exactly. They need to make sure their procedures reflect this new non-stacking policy. The order even mentions they might need to revise or cancel existing rules if they conflict with this new directive.
So the officers assessing duties need to know these new rules.
Yes, absolutely. And the order also notes that the Secretary of Commerce and the U.S. Trade Representative will provide guidance, too, to make sure everyone's on the same page about how this works.
Is there a deadline for this to be up and running?
There is. The order specifies that any needed changes to the Harmonized Tariff Schedule, the HTSUS, have to be done not later than 12:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on May 16th, 2025.
May 16th. Okay, that's pretty soon after the order.
It suggests they want this implemented relatively quickly.
Now, there was one part that really jumped out at me, something about it being retroactive. What does that mean for companies?
Yes, that's a huge point for businesses. Section 5 states that this order applies retroactively
How far back?
to entries of merchandise made on or after March 4th, 2025.
March 4th. Okay. So if a company imported, say, auto parts or steel after that date, and they did pay stacked tariffs from that list we discussed.
Then they could be eligible for a refund of those extra stacked duties.
Wow.
Yeah, the order says refunds will be processed following CBP's standard procedures. So companies that think they might have overpaid because of stacking on these specific tariffs since early March should definitely look into that.
That could be a significant cash back for some businesses,
Yeah.
especially in those sectors like automotive or metals. That's a big practical takeaway.
Absolutely. For anyone managing imports in these areas, understanding that retroactive piece and the refund possibility is pretty crucial for their bottom line.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up then. The big picture is this presidential order zeroes in on a specific list of tariffs, autos, border-related stuff, steel, aluminum. It stops them from stacking on top of each other on the same imported product, setting up a clear priority list. Auto tariffs come first, then border, then steel and aluminum.
Which, remember, can still stack with each other, that exception.
Right, the steel-aluminum exception. And critically, this doesn't touch other tariffs like Section 301 or regular duties.
Correct.
Homeland Security and CBP are making it happen, aiming for mid-May implementation, and crucially, it applies retroactively back to March 4th, meaning potential refunds are on the table.
That sums it up well. It's really an effort by the administration to fine-tune the application of these specific trade tools, trying to avoid what they see as excessive costs piling up.
And for you listening, particularly if you're in that, say, 24-44 age range, maybe you run a business that uses imported steel, or you work in the auto industry, or even just track manufacturing trends, this is relevant stuff.
Definitely.
It could directly influence business costs, supply chains, maybe even the final price tags on certain things. It's a good reminder that these seemingly technical policy tweaks can ripple out in very real ways.
It really highlights that constant tension in trade policy, doesn't it? Trying to use tariffs for specific goals, but also needing to manage the practical side effects, the economic impacts on businesses and potentially on consumers.
So as you go about your week, maybe you hear about car prices or see construction happening. It's interesting to think about these underlying policy mechanics. How might this specific non-stacking rule actually play out? What impacts might you notice or expect to see in industries you follow or products you buy? Definitely something to keep an eye on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.